Sixx Sense with Nikki Sixx. Sixx and Jen and the Sixx Sense.
We are hanging out with little Steven. What's up, dude?
I'm good. How you doing?
It's good to have you in.
Good to be here. Good to see you.
It's good to have a radio guy on a radio show.
Yeah.
You're professional.
Well, let's not go too far now.
Well, I mean, mostly when a couple of my friends that have been doing radio, a couple years or podcasts and stuff, and we've been just over 7 years, but like you double that. That's massive. You were in early.
Yeah, I don't know if any of us were doing it by then. I'm not sure if Alice, maybe Alice Cooper, but not too many of us rockers were taking over the airwaves.
Well, it's cool because you got the knowledge. And each generation of guys got a knowledge that the audience doesn't sometimes know about.
Well, yeah, I made a point of our thing was going to be all, whatever it was, 50 years of rock and roll. And now we're heading towards 70 years of rock and roll, starting around 1951. And we just decided we're gonna make the British invasion like the center of our thing, and then play everything that influenced the British invasion and everything the British invasion has influenced since. So it's a big umbrella, but people said you can't be that diverse, and I said yes, you can. You can connect the dots and play. We'll play a song, by the Stones, and then play the original version of it. Something that they covered.
See that I love that stuff.
Yeah, and people just they dig it, because it's something that they're not going to hear anywhere else really. So we were able to do that and just play album cuts and stuff that. And now that the formats have really narrowed in the mainstream world, there's nothing left. I mean,
you seem like you think like a guy would like fit into like the internet world, as far as like social media, not just like Twitter and that stuff, but being able to get your music and your all your stuff out there. Do you embrace it, or do you keep more in your radio format?
Well, I stick with the we started off regular, what they call terrestrial, and we did that for a few years, and I built it up to like 100 and I don't know what it was. 140 stations or so,
Yeah.
And then Sirius XM came along, which was really useful because I had created a whole format for my 2-hour show, which means I had picked, I think, 4,000 songs. I could only play like 26, per week,
Right.
So here comes Sirius Satellite saying, hey, what do we do with this Sirius Satellite thing? And my friend had become a advisor to them, and he came to me and says, what do we do with this? I said, well, I got 2 new formats, one of which is the Underground Garage and one of which is called Outlaw Country. And basically, it's just all the cool stuff nobody's playing. That's pretty much the concept. So I started the first 2 original formats on Sirius Satellite 24/7.
Yeah.
I already had one built already, So it just came along at the right time. And so I never got near the internet thing so much because Sirius kind of satisfied that. Modern, thing. And
well,
then
in your mind, you're able to play whatever you want.
Well, yeah.
It's so good for the listener. Like when I was a kid working at record stores, that was the key. It wasn't that I was getting minimum wage. It's that I could listen to all those records. I love that. I miss those days. And, it's like I always searching for a way to get all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a shame that there's no more record stores, because that was a big thing for us too, but you got to adapt to what's going on as much as you can. But our whole thing was, I gotta, you put on the radio these days, and I just felt like, man, this isn't right. This isn't fair to this generation of kids.
Yeah,
this is what they're getting.
I got you.
Our pop bands were the Beatles, and Rolling Stones, and it's not a matter of good or bad or better or worse, but I just felt like we grew up in a Renaissance period, from 1951 to 71, I think is a legitimate Renaissance period. It'll be studied for hundreds of years to come. I really believe that. And everything since has come from that era, and yet you can't hear it, I said, how are people supposed to aspire to greatness if they don't have any access to it?
When guys are coming up to learn music, they always go back to the blues. Yeah. That's where they start. They don't, they may end up somewhere else. They may end up in a heavy metal band, but they all that's where they start, and those are the soul of that, the spirit of that. It's real.
And that's important for guys like us to tell, younger kids, if you dig what we're doing, this is where we come from,
Yeah.
And I always encourage bands, because what's happening now, what's really scary to me is not just not having access to things anymore, which Sirius is helping to fix, and shows like yours, but also they've been, because of the internet and their access to that, they grow up and they learn how to play an instrument, and the next thing you know, they're like recording and writing original songs and putting them out, and they're skipping the bar band phase.
Very important part. Yeah.
And that, to me, was the
most...
You
have to suck to get great.
Absolutely.
You have to. I remember some of the first times being on stage, but they were important. You learn what not to do.
That's right. And you learn to interact with an audience, and you learn to interact with your other band members and human contact, which is being avoided these days, it's healthy, okay? It's healthy. And not only that, but, I tell younger bands, don't start writing songs the minute, you learn how to play an instrument. Copy your favorite songs first, okay? Make a list of your 20, 30, 40, 50 favorite songs, and copy them, because you got to analyze them. You got to understand what's going into those songs, and then you play them live, and you see what the reaction is, and then you start to understand chord changes and what's the bass doing in that song, what's the drums doing in that song,
and what are you trying to do to an audience? Are you trying to wind them up in a certain part?
And it shows what you're good at.
Learn from songs that do that.
Well, that's another very important point. Just what is your purpose? Because our purpose is a little bit different probably than yours. When we grew up, you had to be a dance band. We were all dance bands. We were coming from the real old tradition. We're probably the last generation to do that. But the Beatles and Stones and the Who and bands like us, you had to make people dance. When people were dancing to rock and roll back then, and if you didn't make them dance, you were fired. You weren't there the next week. So that extra energy that it took to get people out of their chairs and make them dance, we took right into the concert world.
Mm-hmm.
You have that little extra energy, that we maintain to this day, of just like pulling them, pulling them in, and that never goes away.
I think once you do that, it's hard to go on stage. And I guess one way of looking at it is just kind of stand there and play. It's like you're giving your all, because that's what you do. And then the audience gives their all, and it just creates this crazy energy.
Yeah.
Once I learned that, I could never just be like, I just want to kind of play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to jump around, but you know what I'm talking about.
No. It's an intensity that I think just comes from it mattering. It's not. There's just nothing casual about it for people like us.
That's the guitar player face.
That's
where that comes from.
Yeah, there's that. But we just, again, our standards were just set so high. That era of the 60s was just ridiculous. Between all of the bands, like I said, all the British bands coming over, every month there was somebody new, here's this group called the Kinks, here's this group called the Who, here's Procol Harum, Oh, by the way,
seems so rich.
Yeah, here's a new kid, Jimi Hendrix. But then you had, here's Marvin Gaye. Here's, Stevie Wonder. Here's, Smokey Robinson, Curtis Mayfield. Sam and Dave, Otis Redding. Every single month, bam, bam, bam. Getting hit with this incredible greatness that we kind of just took for granted. And And now, you realize that was a very, very special time, and people need to have access to it,
Yeah, for sure. So, 18 years since your last solo album?
Well,
I mean, I just listened to your record. I'm like, are you crazy? This thing's like, don't do that. We can't wait another 18 years. Not at my age. I won't have hearing again.
Just sign it to me, please.
I figure, every 20 years or so, should, go back to work.
We need to bring it in about 5, okay?
I really don't have any good excuse, Nick. It's just like I started acting, and got into that, and that became a whole new craft to learn, which was fun.
Yeah.
To learn a new craft at this point in the game, and that turned into multiple crafts because I started, writing for TV and producing, and I directed the final episode of Lilyhammer, and got into that, and then Bruce started touring again and put the band back together right around the same time. And, before
the
you know
years
it,
just
20
clicked
years, 20 years went by. I'm like, man, this ain't right, and, people have been bugging me to put my old records back out, which I haven't even remastered them or anything. So my 5 solo albums are going to start coming back out. And then,
nice.
And it was a weird circumstance, man. I wasn't even planning on doing a record, but this cat asked me, with the European promoter, London promoter, we're finishing the European tour last year, and he said, "When are you coming back to London?" I said, "Well, me and my wife are coming back for Bill Wyman's 80th birthday, right? Wants me to play at his birthday party." And he says, "That's the same week as my blues festival, Why don't you put a band together?" And I'm like, I haven't done that for a while, like a long while. I said, what the hell, So I did that. I threw a band together and started, put some blues things in there, which I've never really done since I've gotten into the business. And started, doing some of the songs I used to do. And it really felt good, It really felt kind of good. So we did this gig, went great, and I said, this feels like an album, so maybe it's time.
Is that the band that's on the record?
Some, yeah.
Different musicians, different tracks.
It's a whole different world, Nicky. When it comes to that stuff, man, it's fascinating now because we grew up with rock guys playing, obviously in a rock band, but through the years, my stuff has become a bit sophisticated to the point where I started using session people for the first time. I mean, I didn't meet a session guy for the first 20 years of my, career, They were just another world. You read about session guys playing on Phil Spector records or Motown,
Sure.
You never really met any because it's just a different world. But now, my stuff has gotten quite, I got background vocals and string parts and horn parts, and it's more like a jigsaw puzzle that needs to be a little bit more precise. So I started using session guys who can perform.
So you take them with you?
Yeah, but the problem is, anybody who's a solo person, and there's, a lot of us out there, they all want the same people,
Yeah.
So it's very possible now, from now on, every time I go out, it's going to be with a different band.
Sure. Could be fun, though.
That's kind of creative.
Well, yeah, it is.
I mean, you can tell this is, recorded, I guess I could say traditionally. So it sounds like, the guitars are mic'd down. The drums, I can hear the vocals are on the background vocals, all of it. It's just it's live sounding in a sense.
It really is. Yeah, it's live. I mean, my room isn't that big, so I do have to overdub strings and horns.
So you did the whole thing in your studio?
Yeah. It's it's about twice as big as this room. It's as big as Sun or Motown or Chess. Wow. They did all right, but I noticed I got like a little bit of a booth, a door between me and the drums, for the reference vocals. And on like 3 or 4 of the songs, I started to re-sing them. And the drum sound changed, because it's leaking into the mic.
Yeah,
so I just kept the reference vocals.
That's the way it was done.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's fun. That's the way to do it. I mean, if I had a big enough room, I would do it literally all of it live. But it's pretty close to that.
What did it feel like for you to get back in there? I mean, to really start to warm it back up?
It felt good, It felt kind of good, and
were you nervous? Were you rusty?
No,
Okay.
no, I really wasn't. It just kind of felt very natural. I mean, it's a whole different gig live. It's a very, very different job. You know what I mean? But in the studio, it didn't feel that weird. You know, I don't know why. It's been a long time, but I just felt that was fine.
It was meant to be.
But it's going to take me a couple of tours and a couple of years to get back to being a front man for real. You know,
Yeah.
It's a whole different gig, and you know that's going to take a minute. But right now it's all about the music, and that's what it's going to have to be about. You know, so I just go out there and I'm just like the band leader. I'm just presenting this thing.
So
you know?
you're heading to Europe for you?
Yeah, 5 weeks starting Monday with a
Wow.
15-piece band, 5 horns
Oh,
and
come on.
3 girls, and
You
yeah.
could play live in here. I mean, it's a little bit small, but
Just Nikki can be your session player. I can play tambourine like you would not believe.
Tambourine on every song.
Yeah,
It's
and
very
then
important.
He can
Great.
play like 3 instruments, and then so you got it all right here.
All right, let's go. Who
you know,
needs,
when
like,
you've been
the-
playing as long as you, it's curious. Asked a couple of my friends this, get different answers. You play every day?
No, never.
That's why a couple of my friends say that. I work my ass off to just be okay. I mean, my wife's like, can we have sex? I'm like, I can't. I got another hour of running the same scale I've been doing since I was 14. And then there's guys like you. It's like, I don't play. I'm just great. It's like,
Well, I mean, it happens.
is there like a place you hit and then you just know the instrument and a little bit of playing and you're back warmed up? And
I think. I mean, you know, it does take a bit of warming back up.
Sure.
In between tours, you know, but it depends on your goal and your kind of and what you want to do. I mean,
yeah.
for me, you know, we all start off kind of in that muso, learn your craft, right?
Sure.
Learn that first craft. We didn't know we had to learn 5 crafts in rock and roll, but we thought we always were going to have be one, which was learn your instrument. And in that there was a period there where guitar really became, you know, the thing. I mean, the guitar player was actually more important than the singer for a few years.
Yeah.
You know, and so everybody sort of really became as good as they could be. But soon after that, very soon after that, I realized what I really dug was being good enough to service the song. It was really about the songs for me.
I feel like that too.
You know what I mean? Let me do a cool solo, but my favorite solos are in those 3.5 minute records that, you know, the Yardbirds records where, you know, Jeff Beck or Eric Clapton is playing that 20-second solo, you know, 30-second solo. That's the coolest stuff for me in the world. You know, that point where the rock era was bumping up against the pop era, and you still had the pop configuration of songs. You know, you had to still be around 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, but yet now the saxophone solos have been replaced by guitar, and there was just a cool rock sensibility going on in the songs, like, you know, Happenings 10 Years Time Ago, or you know, Shapes of Things, or, you know, and you know, there was My Generation by The Who, or, you know, All Day and All Night by The Kinks. You know, these were pop hits.
Yeah.
You know, but in following the pop rules of 2.5 minutes to 3.5 minutes.
Which trained me, by the way, because I was
a songwriter.
That's like the only way I thought it was. So sometimes when I'm working with somebody, we want to get like to maybe to 5 minutes. I feel like it should go back. I like 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes. Just my ear, you know, because I was probably trained by those bands you're talking about.
Yeah, and the whole thing, you know, it got pretty wild there for a minute, and it would start to be 10 and 15-minute guitar solos, and then suddenly it just like ended, man. I mean, I remember the day, you know, things were just getting, you know, the blues thing had caught on around. As you started to say before, Nikki, there was a trend going on in those days every year, and the whole music world followed it. You know, we were very much a monoculture inside this American sort of weird country where there's no culture, right? You know, we're not like any other country when it comes to culture. Everybody else has a common culture. America's the only country in the world that's culture is ideas, right? But when it came to music, there was basically only one station in every town. Everybody listened to it. So we were very much a mono, you know, 64 British Invasion, 65 was folk rock, '66 was country rock, '67 psychedelic, '68 blues, and '69 the Southern thing came in. And right at that point, within '69 to '70 or so, here comes the band, bringing everything back full circle, back to simple songs, And it just like everybody went boom, He went from 15-minute solos to like none,
Right.
and just like that. And suddenly, everybody started focusing on songs again. And then the whole thing fragmented. We were all listening to the same thing for all those years. And then come 70 or 71, 72, the whole business fragmented into, heavy metal would start, with Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, and all the way to the singer-songwriters of James Taylor and, Carole King and whatever, and everything in between. So suddenly you had 12 different genres where up until then, really everybody followed one at a time,
Right.
So it was an
I
interesting.
haven't really thought about it. It makes so much sense.
I know, it really does.
When I was growing up in the 70s, I listened to it all. In Seattle, we had one radio station. I would hear Olivia Newton-John next to Led Zeppelin, next to you guys, next to whatever. And it was just the way my brain brought it in, and I was like, oh, this is what music is. And then as it started to separate, you kind of picked a fighter, so to speak. It's like, that's my
right.
fighter, and I went
That's
in that
right.
direction.
Yeah, and it's kind of been that way ever since, pretty much.
I can see that, yeah.
But it was an interesting time to
You
grow
could do
up.
an EDM record. You should do an EDM record. No, I'm just being sarcastic. Just slap me.
I couldn't work the technology. I couldn't turn the
I
thing
don't get
on
it.
to like, help me.
My son does that, and he's really good at it.
I was going to say, yeah.
And he was like trying to show me some stuff, and I was just like, can I just record an A chord into that, and you could manipulate it and
Right.
get back to me with a finished track.
As far as your acting goes, or your directing or producing, whatever, are you going to move forward with that still too?
Yeah. It's just so hard now to
Why
get
have
things
one
going.
job when you can?
Yeah, I've always been like that, I just realized I don't know why, but if I do just one thing, I just tend to overdo it. You know what I mean? So I need like 5 things happening at once so I can give them all 100%
Yeah.
instead of 120.
For some reason, your brain operates at a comfort level, but everybody around you stressed out because you're just like, but it's comforting.
Yeah, and it's different parts of your brain, I find. In other words, it relaxes that one part of your brain that needs to be working on something else while you're doing this other thing,
Yeah.
So when you come back to it, you never burn out that way on any one thing, But
Was acting easy for you?
it was
It
a
looks
whole,
easy.
It was.
That's right.
I was very lucky in that it was that I felt I could do that type of role. Kind of grew up around those guys a little bit, and I'd been a fan of the genre. I'd seen every movie and read every book and just kind of dug that whole thing and as a history, and I just made up my own kind of rules. I said, I gotta just look at this. I gotta look in the mirror and see this other guy. And if I can see somebody else, I can be him.
Did they let you take the reins on your own, or did they kind of?
To some extent, yeah. I created the character, what it looked like, and wrote a biography about him. And and I came up with a philosophy that I don't know, what other people do, but I said every one of us, every human being has every characteristic, I think, inside them. And I just made this up. And so acting would be finding that one characteristic that fits that character and then inhabiting it and bringing it to life. You know what I mean? So that I had already been an autobiographical songwriter now for years, which I think helped the acting thing,
Right.
Yeah.
helped you find
I
that,
can see that. The bridge.
that centerpiece. And then, so like I say, I made a biography. I, decided the guy was kind of a romantic in terms of looking back on the mob, the romantic years, when people didn't rat each other out. And, it was kind of, not true, but he thought it was in his head. So I gave him like a 50s look,
Yeah.
And to this day, I have so much respect for actors who can act looking like themselves. I don't know how you do that. I gotta look like a completely different person in order to be that.
I've always
other person.
wondered that myself. Like, I think Brad Pitt's an amazing actor, and he always looks like Brad Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
But any character he takes on, I believe he's that character.
Yeah.
And I kind of relate to it. It's probably from what we do. We kind of dress the part in rock and roll. We dress the part, so it makes sense.
And I realized that when I went to sing this album, I realized, all singers are actors. You're acting out, and the script is that song.
Sure.
Right? So you have to become the character in that song, right? Singing that song to make it believable, right? It's another acting job, really. Yeah.
You ever cross-pollinate the concept of, I think of how to say this, like almost like you write a role and then you could write a song about that character, play it out in bigger beyond that?
I haven't done that yet, but this is like the beginning of a whole new thing. I'm going to stick with it now. I mean, I'm not going to abandon little Steven the artist again for another 20 years.
Yeah.
But I realized I couldn't just write a whole new album. That's a whole nother muscle I haven't been using, even though I wrote the score for Lilyhammer for 3 years. It's different. It's different than writing an album for yourself,
Yeah.
So I was able to use this album, first of all, as a nice way of reintroducing myself and in fact, introducing myself in many ways, because I've never, like I said, you went through these phases, but by the time you got into the recording studio and you're in the business, you have attained an identity, right?
Right.
And then you carry that on. So for the first time, I was able to put a couple covers on a record, put some blues on a record. I never did that before. A doo-wop song on a record. I got some jazz in there. I got some Ennio Morricone stuff in there. I got, a bunch of things that I never have, a couple of covers. I never did a cover song before, Had James Brown, had a James. So
why haven't you done a cover?
Well, because you have to have your own identity. Like I say, when at least in the old days now, when the business was a real business, you had to have a certain level of identity, and usually that involved writing yourself. You know what I mean, or having somebody write for you or co-write. You weren't, as opposed to the second generation. We were third generation rock and roll. The second generation was a little different. I mean, the Beatles and Stones were doing covers right through their fifth album.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
5 albums. And long after they were known as the greatest songwriters in the world, they're still doing cover songs. That's how into it they were. For our generation, it wasn't really cool. You were expected to kind of write and, be your own thing. Yeah. So it was nice. It was nice to be able to do some covers and to do at least a wide range of things to say, listen, this is what makes me, these elements make me who I am,
Yeah.
And it was nice to be able to do that. But now I'll continue and I'll tour with Bruce when he goes out, and maybe every other summer I'll do Disciples of Soul, my thing. In a perfect world, I'll do a TV show in the wintertime. We'll see about that.
Oh, my God. You guys are out of your minds.
But
what? A day off? No, I'm good. I don't need that.
But I had a vacation once in 1978. And I didn't like it. I didn't get it.
He looked kind of freaked out in the hallway when I
Yeah.
told him I was taking 2 years off. He was like,
Well,
I had to take it off. I had to force myself because I'm like you. I just want to keep. But my day off is working on a record.
That's what I
doing
mean.
a radio show.
Define off.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it just means I'm not on the road.
Which,
But I'm starting to miss it already. It's a little bit getting that itch. You talked about your the first single, Soulfire, a little bit.
Yeah, I like I said, I wasn't quite ready to write a whole new album, so I thought, well, let me just do an album of me covering me. I'll do songs I've written for other people or with other people, and that was a song I wrote with a guy from a group called the Breakers in Denmark. I'm going to see him on Monday. Actually, going back to Copenhagen on Monday, and it was just one of those things. They were on my label.
when did you write it?
Oh man, I have no sense of time whatsoever. It
A
could
few years
be-
ago, or like
Yeah, no, it's years.
Who was
like
president?
Well, we're
Oh,
having
geez.
a problem here because he only makes a record.
I
every
know, so
18
I'm trying
years.
to figure
He's
it
like, I
out.
wrote it 18 years ago.
No,
Right?
no, but I would. on some of the bands that I signed, occasionally I would produce a single and write something, for the bands, and several of those are on this record. Like St. Valentine's Day, I'd written for the Cocktail Slippers, was a Norwegian band. This was a Danish band called the Breakers, and I picked the songs that had the most meaning for me.
Yeah,
and I kind of rewrote them occasionally to fit me even more.
Sometimes it's fun to revisit a song because you're like, I love the chord progression, but I just wasn't ready to record or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it feels brand new, but also familiar.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky when you not only wrote it, but arranged it and produced it in the first place,
Yeah.
So it's a little, sometimes that's just the way it was meant to be, and there's a couple of those. There's a couple of those I did with Southside Johnny that I just couldn't change the arrangement. It was just like, this is right, so it's just me singing it instead of him, but it made me appreciate Southside and because some of the songs are very simple and, with very few notes in the melody line, and you can't mess around with it. You can't improvise all around it. You gotta do what's there, and that makes the fewer notes makes every note count a little bit more. So there's an intensity that's built into these songs that I noticed that's a little bit different than what people are writing today.
I felt that with Soulfire. I felt like it was organic and familiar, without being, I've heard this before. It was just, it felt like home.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and
nice.
I know what you're saying about the not overdoing it. But you guys, and even with Bruce, it's like, you guys will take something and just beat it with a 2x4. I'm like, how do you keep making it have life? It's like it just keeps going and growing and layers, and it could be right in that pocket. And it's just, it's amazing to me.
But again, it's where it comes from, If you grow up listening to those Motown records, which is the greatest records ever made.
Do you go back to that place?
I kind of never left.
Okay.
To be honest, you know what I mean? I'm not nostalgic about the 60s. I just never left.
Okay.
Well,
it's working.
I'm just there, And it's not nostalgia to me. I just find it totally relevant, And I think that stuff is going to resonate until they invent new instruments, until we go completely electronic or whatever's next, I think it's going to resonate, continue to resonate. We just have a little bit more intensity because of where it was coming from, It's coming out of the gospel church, and coming from country blues, which is, life and death stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And then gospel became soul once it left the church, but that same intensity remained in Sam Cooke and Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin, Instead of singing to God, you're now singing about a woman or whatever it might be, but equally intense, right?
Right.
And the British invasion were picking up on that stuff. So they were trying to compete with that also.
That's right.
And again, the standards just were up and stayed up, and that's the one thing I noticed when I started singing these songs again. I was like, wow, there's a different kind of intensity that goes with that era. That we'll see if it's still relevant or not. I don't know. We'll find out. When I get out on the road.
Still in everyone's bloodstream. It's not going to go anywhere.
I hope so. I hope you're right. We'll see.
So after Europe, what does it look like for you?
It's unclear.
Just kind of riding a wave?
Well, it's just a 15-piece band, man. It's tough, okay? I mean, I'm definitely going to lose money, which is okay. I'm ready to invest in this thing because, like I say, it's going to take 2 or 3 tours to get back where I was and probably get to the point where we can break even.
You going to play in America with that band?
Yeah, I'm going to certainly try. I'm going to try, man. I'm going to try. I mean, we will... We'll do something here for sure, but
can you do it on the West Coast?
Can you go to Nikki's house?
I will.
I'm out by Westlake. I don't know. He's like, I'm never going on that show again.
But yeah, we're certainly going to make every effort to do that. But it's just not as easy as it used to be. It just,
Yeah.
Where do most of the people in your band, where do they live? Does it happen to be West Coast by Nikki's house?
No,
but really,
local.
It's
Are they
East
from
Coast
everywhere?
by his
Mostly,
house.
kind of a little bit from everywhere, but mostly local. Like I say, I'm not sure how long I'll have these people.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants the same 150 session people. There's and I can only offer so much at this point, so it's going to take a minute to get reestablished, and then I can book a year's worth of gigs or whatever,
And
even
you
6
have to
months.
do it like that. That's like after Motley, I did this other band, Sixx AM, and we went out and toured, and I had to run it like a business, and people were like, oh man, jets and this and that. I was like, no, we got to like kind of like we all got to get paid what we're getting paid for the gig. And it makes you grateful as well, and it reminds you that that's how we started.
Yeah.
I like that. I didn't like it when I got home. I didn't have any money because I did lose money, but you do it for the music.
But the difference being, and that's what I was trying to explain, the difference being that's a rock thing, okay? And that's what I did most of my life too. Now, the guys aren't going to take a piece of what you get paid that day. They get paid.
Right.
No matter what, it doesn't matter what you're making.
Yeah.
They're getting paid, okay?
Yeah.
And because they're so good, and they need to be so good for this, I'm literally, there's probably 5 different genres of music on this new album, Soulfire.
Can you wing it live with these guys? If you feel like just saying we're going to throw something in,
That you so can't wing it.
you can't.
No, but
Are you so over the wing? I mean, you have a wing it band.
well, we're extremely wing it with Bruce. I mean, we will take a request and rehearse it on stage in front of 70,000 people. We've done that.
I love that.
I mean, we turn stadiums into clubs every night. We don't care.
That's what makes it special.
That's kind of fun. Yeah, this is the opposite of that. Now I will rehearse more songs. There'll be a range of songs that we can throw in.
Yeah, sure.
But you need to have them rehearsed and charted. The horns work off charts now.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's a whole different kind of thing that I'm adapting to. But my thing is sort of creating great bands. That's really my thing. So it's always going to be a great band, but it could be different people in the same tour. It could be different people.
That makes sense. Well, we love the record, and I'm real excited that you're here, and I can't wait to come see you play live. And anytime you want to come back, we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Give this a serious. I'm gonna try and wear it out. It's possible.
Well, I really, it's great that you dig this, and I appreciate it.
Nikki Sixx and Jen on the Sixx Sense.